morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Director of Housing Policy, Stephanie Watkins-Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are having a great week so far. Going to go ahead and kick it off with organizational updates. Again, if you haven't already, remember to save the date for this year's Bringing It Home, Ending Homelessness in North Carolina conference. It will take place on June 4th through the 5th, 2024 at the McKimmon Center in Raleigh. And for the first time since 2019, we will be back in person to learn. So registration will open in March, and check out our conference page. The link is in the call notes for all the updates regarding that event. Moving to federal updates, we are once again approaching another potential federal shutdown. The first of two deadlines approaches on March 1st. And the first half of the federal spending agreement that's expected to top $1.7 trillion is set to be just another nail biter, it seems. And also, as if that wasn't enough, President Biden's proposed fiscal 2025 budget is due out on March 11th, which will add additional spending debates to the mix. Note that Congress is currently in recess until February 27th and 28th, so that gives them literally 2 to 3 days to finalize everything or the government will shut down. One of the spending bills that must be ready by March 1st and approved includes the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, or THUD bill, that funds HUD's vital affordable housing and homelessness programs. You've heard us talk about this several times. So the biggest thing we want to emphasize to you all is to please continue to reach out to your representatives in Congress. The appropriators have to reconcile the differences between the House and Senate draft spending bills, which propose 10% and 13% increases to HUD's budget, respectively. However, neither bill provides sufficient funding to renew all existing housing choice voucher contracts upon turnover, meaning hundreds of thousands of households could lose their housing assistance. Again, this budget increase is not an expansion of programming. It is to be able to sustain programming along with the increase in cost that it takes to operate these programs. So continue to reach out to your representatives in Congress, ask them and urge them to make available full funding to renew all existing contracts for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, increase funding for public housing operations and repairs, at minimum, going with the Senate's proposed $3.9 billion in funding for homeless assistance grants, the protection of the $20 million in funding for the eviction prevention grant program provided in the Senate bill, and to go with the House's proposed $1.1 billion in funding for native housing. We have several links in the call notes for you, a way for you to add your organization to a letter that urges Congress to invest in affordable housing and community development, as well as a way to directly contact your representatives with sort of a pre-designed form. Moving to state updates. Early voting is underway, so you may have already been receiving a lot of news and messages. Many media and advocacy groups are also asking local candidates about affordable housing. So before you head to the polls, make sure you do some research to see where candidates stand on various housing issues, as well as how they've decided and what decisions they've made in the past if they're running for re-election. Here, we're going to link a few just general resources for voters in our call notes. If you have questions about voting, what your ballot looks like, and so on and so forth, we'll link those in the call notes. Moving to state legislative updates, the North Carolina House Select Committee on Homeowners Associations reviewed the 5 proposed recommendations at last week's meeting. They also went through a draft bill that was presented and will be back before the committee on February 28th. The final recommendations for the General Assembly are due on March 1st. And some of the tentative recommendations in the draft bill include some of the following. So they're asking for transparent and timely HOA records. So HOAs must provide records to their members within 30 days of receiving a written request, and they are required to provide financial records for 3 years from the date of their request. A lot of complaints from the folks participating or providing public comment at these meetings cited a lot of issues with transparency, specifically around finances. A second recommendation is that no large HOA assessment increases will be passed without the majority of owners' approval. So a proposal to increase assessments by more than 10% must have the approval of the majority of all homeowners within a specific neighborhood. 3, possibly one of the most impactful ones, HOAs cannot foreclose on a house because the owner owes a small amount. So this recommendation says in order for the HOA to put a lien on a home, the homeowner must owe more than 6 months assessment or $2,500, whichever is less, before the HOA can initiate a foreclosure proceeding, and they must offer the homeowner a reasonable payment plan schedule to cure the debt. And the remaining 2 recommendations include mandatory mediation before filing a civil lawsuit, and the creation of a statewide HOA complaint filing system. So these are just some of the few tentative recommendations in that draft bill. And again, it'll be back before the committee on February 28th next week. And final recommendations will go to the larger General Assembly on March 1st. We're also continuing to keep an eye out on any updates regarding negotiations or conversations between the North Carolina Department of Insurance and the North Carolina Rate Bureau, the agency that represents companies that write insurance policies, and earlier this year requested an average of a 42.2% rate increase for homeowners insurance. So Commissioner Mike Causey did reject this proposal, and a hearing is set for October 2024. However, agreement can still be reached before then. We're also still collecting stories. So if you are comfortable sharing stories about how this would impact you, your community, your business, please fill out the form in the call notes. It can be anonymous if you choose it to be. And it will be really impactful. It will continue to be really impactful as we continue to share why these astronomical increases would really hurt households all over our state. Moving to local community updates, there are a lot of activities happening in Asheville, specifically looking at public and private partnerships that are working together to address the need for affordable housing in terms of homeownership and also deeply affordable rental housing. So a project of 69 units was recently approved in Asheville for the new Leicester Highway. Last week, the Buncombe County Board of Adjustment approved this community, of which 75% of the units will be affordable. The affordable single-family and attached single-family houses will be developed by Mountain Housing Opportunities and sold to families earning less than 80% of the area median income. This project received a $1 million grant from the Dogwood Health Trust, and qualifying families will also be able to apply for a USDA Rural First Loan and receive interest-free secondary loans from Mountain Housing Opportunities. Another development in Asheville, by the Haywood Street Development Corporation, they're hosting a ribbon cutting actually tomorrow on West Haywood Street, 41 deeply affordable rental apartments. It'll be a groundbreaking ceremony. 37 of the 41 units will be reserved for Housing Choice Voucher participants, and the remaining 4 units will be for families earning 80% of AMI or below. And again, this uses both public and private financing, including allocations from the city, from their affordable housing bond and their housing trust fund, funding from Buncombe County and the awesome folks at Dogwood Health Trust, and also an additional $2.2 million in charitable donations and a loan for the remaining conventional debt by Self-Help Credit Union. These are just 2 great examples of all the layers of funding needed to make affordable housing happen. Moving towards the center of the state, Winston-Salem is finding that the number of unhoused people or people experiencing homelessness in their city is growing. A presentation from a recent Winston-Salem Community Development, Housing, and General Government meeting indicates that Winston-Salem's unofficial 2024 point-in-time count reports a year-over increase in homelessness. Since last year's count, the number of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness increased from 87 to 125. And the number of people in emergency shelters also increased by 80 people. And over the past 5 years, the indicators of solving homelessness have trended downward. Now, this is something that really fits in with the narrative that we're hearing across the country, right? That homelessness is on the rise. And so Winston-Salem is one of many places that is looking to figure out how to address this. Over 5,000 housing units have been approved by Greensboro. The City of Greensboro's Planning Department recently released a graphic summary that shows how the city is assisting in the creation of more housing through both rezoning and annexation. 5,062 potential housing units were approved in 2023 through rezoning and the annexation process through the city, and 92% of these approvals were for multifamily residential units. So some cool data points there. In Columbus County, AmeriCorps volunteers build a new home for Columbus County's family affected by hurricanes. So a family whose mobile home was badly damaged by Hurricanes Matthew and Florence several years ago finally has a new place to call home. The Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Raleigh and 8 AmeriCorps volunteers from across the country recently came to Cerro Gordo, North Carolina, in Columbus County, and spent 3 weeks building a new home for the family. Moving to reports and resources, the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University released a report called Record Homelessness Amid the Ongoing Affordability Crisis. Again, this is something that we're continuing to see on headlines time and time again. We know that housing and homelessness, affordable housing crisis and homelessness are connected, and so the data is just continuing to show that. The Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard also has a report talking about how housing first is still the best approach to ending homelessness. Unfortunately, there's been some anti-homelessness rhetoric and ordinances happening around the country and around our state. And then we've been hearing folks talk about how housing first is not the answer. However, we know based on the data, based on these evidence-based practices, that housing first is still the best approach to ending homelessness. There's also a great toolkit, a voter toolkit for people experiencing homelessness titled Everyone Votes from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So folks who are on the ground, able to interact with folks experiencing homelessness, and if those folks are interested and able to participate in their local elections, this is a great toolkit for that. And another great resource out of BMC Public Health talks about housing insecurity among Black women surviving intimate partner violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this report is really interesting because of its intersectional approach, looking at the domestic violence piece, the pandemic, sort of community health piece, and housing insecurity. Moving to events, there are several events happening both this week and next week, as well as in March. I want to list up a few. The City of Raleigh tomorrow is hosting an open house at the Walnut Creek Wetlands Center from 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. on stormwater and sustainable practices in affordable housing. In person on Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m., NC1 is having their Raleigh Happy Hour, the North Carolina Women's Affordable Housing Network, at Vita V Art Gallery and Wine Bar. And March 11th, our friends at the Cape Fear Housing Coalition are having their annual breakfast from 8 to 10 a.m. This breakfast is hosted by Cape Fear Realtors and will feature a policy update from the North Carolina Housing Coalition, so us, yours truly. And will also include a keynote address from Dr. Greg Colburn, the author of Homelessness is a Housing Problem. This event is free and open to the public, but RSVP is required. And in the news, there are too many to mention today. I would keep you on here for a while, but I just want to lift up two in particular. The first is a piece from Vox talking about a prescription for housing. And it talks about housing as a part of healthcare, which is something that advocates have been shouting for quite some time, and how there is going to be a significant impact this year, especially as Medicaid continues to expand, and as federal Medicaid dollars are able to go towards housing, and just that, the impact of that paradigm shift, right? Treating housing as a part of healthcare. And then another that again is in line with a lot of trends that we've been seeing for the last several years is from Yahoo Finance, talking about how investors bought 26% of the country's most affordable homes in the fourth quarter. So this is the highest share on record that we've seen investors buy up of the affordable housing stock in our country. Again, we have several links in the news section, so please make sure to check it out. We have all the links you need to continue to reach out to your congressmen and congresswomen around the fiscal 24 THUD bill and appropriations. And as always, if you need anything, if you have any questions, or you would like us to focus on something in particular, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.